this session is by Chris and Butch. They're going to be talking about Change Tracker, an overview, and some of the latest enhancements. They'll be introducing themselves and basically running this session because I appear to be completely locked out of this Zoom meeting, apart from audio. So thank you very much for attending. I am going to try and get back in. If you have any questions, Butch is going to be watching the chat, so please feel free to put your questions into the chat as you go along, and then we'll have a Q&A session at the end. Hopefully I'll be back. Okay, so Chris and Butch, absolutely over to you.
Thank you, Anna. My name is Butch Rampish. I'm the 21st Century Product Manager for zOS Change Tracker. And I'm actually standing in for Marna Wally, who is the IBM Product Manager. And normally she would be doing the introduction, but she is unavailable today. Most of the presentation will be done by Chris Taylor, who is a technical sales executive here at 21st Century for Change Tracker. Typical legal disclaimer, we're going to be talking, or Chris is going to be talking about some futures in the product. And as always, we're going to give you the best information we have on what those futures are, but until they're actually generally available, they are subject to change. So that's that. The zOS Chat Tracker is a priced feature of the operating system. It is only available for zOS 2.5. Depending on when you got, if you already have 2.5 running, depending on when you got your shipment or your delivery of 2.5, you may have gotten it before Change Tracker was actually embedded into the delivery. And so you may want to check your server pack and see if it has the FMID HCYG100. And if not, you may need to get an update to your server pack, order a CB PDO if necessary. And there is the ability coming out soon. If you'll watch for APAR PH51954, I know that it will be out imminently. I just saw a note this morning that it has been packaged. So watch for that, and you will actually be able to do start a 90-day trial yourself. You don't have to call anybody or do anything. You literally can install it and start a 90-day trial using the capabilities from that APAR. So with that, I think, yep, we're ready to go. I'm going to turn it over to Chris, and Chris is going to take you through the agenda and the rest of the product. So Chris, over to you, and I'll watch the chat for any questions.
Yeah, thanks, Butch. Just confirming you can hear me.
Yes.
Okay, good. Then that's off to a good start. Good afternoon, good morning for me, but good afternoon. Here, I'm the technical sales executive for IBM zOS Change Tracker, amongst other products as well. I also work with IZBR. I also work with IBM's JCL Expert and other future products that 21st Century develop for IBM. So in the next 55 minutes or so, we're going to go through the highlights of IBM zOS Change Tracker. Butch mentioned that it is only available for zOS version 2.5 at the moment. That will be zOS 2.5 and above, of course. But I will also explain the reasons why it is only available for that release of the operating system. So the agenda is we're going to go through an overview, why we need it, what features it has. We're also going to go then do a deeper dive into how zOS Change Tracker does monitoring and protection, how we can recover, which is part of its features. Also, from an auditing capability, why that would be important. Anna, you've unfrozen. Well done. And also then look at some of the other, how you set it up using zOSMF. Now, interlaced with these, and I will try to highlight what is, let's say, very, very much near term and what might be longer term when we look at features that are planned for the zOSMF interface. So why do we need a product like zOS Change Tracker? Typically, the way I describe it is, let's start with the fundamentals and let's talk about, for example, sys1 datasets. So like sys1.palmlib type datasets, and linked list, of course, and other datasets along those lines. So what challenges do we have in that area? You probably have a change management system for your applications, but there isn't really too many offerings when you come down to being able to audit your system data sets, the ones that you need to run maybe your zOS system, maybe some of your ISV products if you're running products from other companies as well. And then also, what happens if something goes wrong with said products? Maybe somebody makes a configuration change that causes an outage. So first of all, to be able to to look for those kind of changes, which and also to be able to provide regulatory reporting in order to make sure that any changes are being monitored on a regular basis. The who's interested in this kind of thing would be like the zOS system programmer. Or the zOS system programming manager, for example, is to be able to monitor who's making changes to libraries, and also to be able to if necessary, to be able to block those until maybe the change advisory board has approved the change and all those kind of things, and then the change can be made as well. It's also to make sure that only authorized users are making changes to these libraries as well, and that any changes that are being made are being tracked. As you will see, zOS Change Tracker is not just a reporting tool, it is also an enforcement tool as well, to prevent changes from being made if that is configured in that way for certain libraries. So it is a real-time product in that sense. I mean, as I said, it's not just a reporting tool. It does monitor all changes within the sysplex for the libraries that are under its control, provides member level recovery capabilities after a change has been made. And there's also a concept that we'll talk a little bit more about called fingerprinting. And there's various names for that, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in upcoming slides. So what are the top uses of IBM zOS Change Tracker? Change tracking and control for system libraries. As I mentioned, my typical example would be like sys1.palmlib. It does track linked list data sets as well. So those would also be monitored. But if you have products from Broadcom or other customers, other vendors, then that would also be can also be monitored as well. It allows for member level recovery of changes. In other words, if somebody's made a change, depending on how it's configured, you will take a backup of a member, and then when it gets changed, it will take another backup as well. So you could go back to a previous version of that backup very, very quickly. One of the questions that typically comes up is, does this require that the PDSs, for example, that they're being monitored, do they have to be extended PDSs, in other words, PDSEs? The answer to that question is no. It does not require that. It monitors both PDSs and PDSEs, and then any changes that are made to members are stored within Change Tracker's repositories, and the recovery takes place from there. It also allows the ability to be able to document with comments why a change was made. For example, maybe you could say, point to a particular ticket number to say that this was the reason why a particular member was changed. It allows for member level ownership. In other words, you specify changes that could be made either on a group level or on an individual member level. It detects system-wide changes across the environment, including USS. Now, the support for that at the moment is more kind of like a batch reporting capability to monitor where changes have been made. The enforcement right now doesn't take place in the USS environment. It takes place though in the zOS PDS dataset environment. Also has the ability to be able to compare local and remote environments. In other words, making sure that maybe something that was propagated from a development or a test sysplex over to a production sysplex, make sure that everything's in sync and that it's all the same, as well as also being able to validate disaster recovery software for the same kind of purposes. Rollback capabilities, as I mentioned, to be able to recover member level backups, and also then importantly, to be able to provide evidence for compliance reasons and reporting for that as well. So how does it do this? Automatic real-time monitoring for change activities. So you can, there's different ways of providing protection within IBM zOS Change Tracker. So you can limit the changes to specific groups or specific users within those groups. Typically, what we would recommend is establishing a base version of each member within a protected library. And this would then also allow, when changes are made to those libraries, that automatically another member level backup will be taken once that member has been changed. Important things to note is who made the change. In other words, which user ID made the change? What was changed? You know, was it a member? Was it, you know, would things change across the enterprise, let's say? How was the change made? Was it made with IB copy? Was it made using ISPF edit? How was that change made? That's also tracked as well. Of course, very importantly, when was the change made? Okay, problem started at 1 o'clock in the morning. Oh, look, we made a change at midnight. So there's a possibility that that was the cause, you know, for the problem that's occurred. Why was the change made? Okay, put documentation into there to say, for example, you know, we made a change to prog 00 because we added something to the APF list. That would be another example that you can put in the comments. That's not stored in the member. Again, that's stored in one of Change Tracker's repositories and can then be displayed to show reasons for changes being made. As I mentioned, automatic member level backup after you've made a change, and then recoverability, and also the ability to view previous members in order to be able to see what changes have been made. There's 4 core functions within IBM zOS Change Tracker. We provide protection, as I mentioned. We have recovery, so the ability to recover members, auditability for the compliance enforcer to make sure that reports show what changes have been made en masse. And then we have, last but not least, this concept of, you'll hear it, we use different names for it. In the original product, it was known as fingerprinting or tokenization. We also, we're kind of transitioning more towards snapshots. Fundamentally, IBM zOS Change Tracker is a started task on every LPAR within the sysplex, reporting to a common set of control files. And from those control files, recoveries can take place, audit reports can take place, and you know, members can be recovered from those as well. Now, eventually, the goal would be, as we can see here, this is one of the first slides for the zOS MF Plan Vision. That's how IBM has requested that we display things that you know, are not in the product yet. Eventually, the idea will be that one would be able to monitor from a single screen within zOS MF, and then be able to drill down to the various environments to see what's going on. This is one of the more long-term Plan Vision objects rather than short-term. Apologies, have a cough that's going on at the moment. So more about that. We protect critical libraries, and that's this is an example of how it's done in batch. Excuse me, just a second, please. And this is how it's done in batch. In the initial release, that when it came out in May of last year, this is a batch job that would be run. In this case, what we are doing is we are protecting sys1.palmlib. We are locking it. In other words, without checking a member out, an update cannot be made to this data set or members within that data set. Initially equals yes means we are going to take a backup copy of the data set when it's first protected, and then we are going to keep subsequent copies up to 30 copies of each individual member. If we specified, for example, instead of copies equals 30, we specified copies equals 0, it would keep all it would keep ad infinitum the copies of the members in the data set. Sorry, hit the wrong button there. The fingerprinting or snapshots that I was talking about, this is kind of like the ability to en masse be able to process a lot of different data sets. It's typically performed, for example, on a volume level and across the environment, so that we can see very, very quickly what changes may have been taken in the environment, going across multiple types of data sets, not just PDS or PDSE. Also, you can look at files in USS in this case, and as well as sequential and other types of data sets as well. A high-level compare can be done across environments as well. So a local environment, for example, the example we use here is maybe in one environment, your data sets would, might have a system data sets might have a high-level qualifier of SYS3, and maybe in a different environment, they might be SYS7. So that can also be taken into consideration when doing this high-level compare. Butch, are there any questions so far in the chat?
Do not see any in the chat.
Okie dokie, then I will continue. So going on to monitoring and protecting, we like to use personas and kind of look at the use cases of how somebody might use the product. So in this particular case, we're introduced to Alice. We'll see her a couple of times in this presentation, and she's an important system programmer, and needs to know, for example, making sure that on different systems within the Sysplex that certain data sets are being monitored, as well as she also needs to see what has changed across the Sysplexes to make sure that everything is being deployed correctly. So what she can do with Change Tracker is she has the ability to here to see that automatic backups are being taken. There's also the option of using an email notification mechanism, so that when a change takes place, an email can be generated and sent to a user or group of users to show when something has taken place. That's the initial implementation that was selected to use emails in that case. We can protect. We use the concept, we call it protecting a critical library. That means the library is being monitored. If we lock a library, a data set, then that means that the data set members need to be checked out by the administrator before updates can be made by the person who it is assigned to make those updates, or group of users. It is performed on a member level. The administrator can grant or revoke update access. A little bit of a strong word to use. We call it checking in and checking out. This just to mention something at this stage, there is no bypassing here of your security system. In other words, your RACF, your top secret, your ACF2, they are still the primary security control mechanisms. This is just a more granular version of narrowing down to the member level within the PDS or PDSE. What does it look like? It's, as I mentioned, it's a started task. So here we are seeing a sample from a started task, and where we have no data sets protected at this particular point. Now, if you look 3/4 of the way down the page, you will start to see some installation messages into various exit points in IBM in the operating system. So IgG pre is one that we know and love. That's been around for eons, since the very early days of MVS. But then you will see 3 new exit points within the operating system that you might not be familiar with, and these are the ones that came around in zOS 2.5. So you monitors a stow exit, which is typically when members are updated and processed within a PDS or PDSE. It also monitors open and close processing, and this is the main reason why it is only available in zOS 2.5 and future releases, is because this will not be, from what I've heard, retrofitted back to earlier releases of zOS. So the started task is also showing me various other things that are happening. We see some of the data sets that are under the control of zOS Change Tracker. And this is showing me various stati that are being used. For example, you'll see that some of these have minimal attributes. They have I, that means initial. That means that when the data set was protected, it would take a backup of the members within the data set. If you see L, for example, that means that the data set is locked and the members would need to be checked out before they can be updated. In the initial release of Change Tracker, this is an ISPF application and will continue to be an ISPF application. It's just that, as you will see, we're going to be putting zOSMF on top of that to also manage some of the features that you're seeing here in these panels. So how do we protect a resource using ISPF? So we go through, we say, okay, we're going to protect a resource. And then from here, we can, we're going to say, are we going to be looking at a cataloged or uncatalogued data set? We can look at uncatalogued data sets as well. It's just then if you are looking for a particular data set, it would need to be explicitly defined rather than using a pattern capability. As I'm showing here, this is an explicitly defined data set. Once we select a data set, we put a comment in there. We can then also say, do we want to have do we want to generate an email alert? Do we want to lock the data set? Do we want to generate an initial version? How many copies of the data set do we want to keep? This is where I can say, for example, I want to keep 30 copies of a member within the data sets. It doesn't generate the whole data set as a backup. It generates the individual member. And then, we can move forward with that. That in turn, in the initial release, generates a batch job, which would be executed. And then after about 30 seconds or so, it will be propagated to the other members within the sysplex, the other started tasks within the sysplex. And then it will be under change tracker control. In this particular case, all this has is an initial, I didn't lock it, I didn't generate any other attributes with it. So after this has taken place, we also will then show, how this would look, how we envisage this could look under zOSMF. Now, I also have the APAR number up here, which is PH49337. That APAR is not a long way down the road, we think. So keep an eye on that. And once that is available, most of these features that you're seeing in this presentation will be available to be used under zOSMF as well, which is something that we're very excited about. Now, within the panel within zOSMF here, I can see where Change Tracker is active within the sysplex. Of course, if you see red here, that would be a cause for concern, because if the started task is down on that system, then it's not monitoring the activities in its protected data sets. There's some other icons here that will show, for example, whether we have the initialize for a backup version, alerts and whether the data set is locked as well. So how do I add a data set under zOSMF? Again, we're showing you as Plan Vision. This is one of the things that will be available in the short term. And in this particular case, I'm just protecting a data set. I'm saying take an initial copy and basically enabling protection here against this whole data set that you're seeing here. So once that's done, I can then browse down to the various members within that member, and I can perform various functions. Some of these screens date back a little bit in time, so there's more features available, as we'll see in a minute. I can also use the zOSMF editor here to take a closer look at the members within the library, and I can then perform edits directly from within zOSMF. Now, going back to using an ISPF editor here to show what is the effect, what does it look like if you try to perform functions against a data set that, for example, in this case is in a protected data set. Now, I'm going to edit a member, and I'm going to insert 3 lines at the top of this member. When I save the member, I'm going to get notification that change tracker is protecting this data set, and that it's noted that a change has been made. And if we were to look in the started task, then we would see, for example, here that this particular member was updated by C. Taylor, my user ID, the system it was done on, it was using IKJ EFT01, so it's using a TSO, and then where the the data set where this was performed as well as the date and the time that this happened. Now, what happens if I try to edit a member in a locked protected data set? Then I would go again into the editor, let's say, and you're going to get warned when you go in there that you need to check out members first before you make any changes. So if you try to make the changes, then that will not take place. Now, from a security perspective, or let's say, if you want to be a little bit more covert within your environment, then there's also a parameter within the initialization parameter member where you can specify that some of these messages get suppressed, let's say from the syslog, for example, because otherwise these members would be issued to the syslog as well, and that may be something you don't want the entire world to be seeing. So taking a step back, how do I copy members into a protected data set? This is not a locked data set, so I can select members as we've seen. I can move it into a data set. Now, the interesting thing in this particular case is that the source data set is a locked data set, but the target data set is not locked, so you are allowed to do that. So you get messages to say where you're copying from is a locked data set, but I'm actually going to be copying it into just a protected data set, and that is allowed, but will still be monitored. I can then, for example, delete the member from a library. That will also be monitored. And then in the started task, for example, we'll see the activities that we just performed. So we'll see the fact that we updated a member, that we added a member, and then we deleted a member. Now, this is also being written into a repository, into a database, so that additional reports can be run by the auditor, who is another person who is involved within the change tracker environment. He's the compliance enforcer. If he or she needs to run reports in order to be able to see what's going on in the environment and provide proof, then that would be done by the auditor in this particular case. Change tracker, of course, it's not just a question of monitoring online accesses to data sets, it will also monitor batch updates to protected data sets. In this case, I'm using IB copy as an example in 2 cases, and then I'm also using idcams to delete 2 members from those protected data sets as well. And again, the updates in the started task and in the repository will show me where the changes have been made to which data sets, which members, and the times this took place and which utilities were used. So under modified monitoring some of these resources as well, if I wanted to, going back to using zOSMF to do some modifications, you'll see here that ctaylor.demo.jcl is a protected data set. And what I'm going to do in this particular instance is I'm going to add the locked attribute to that. I'm not sure if you can see my cursor, but I'm going to add the locked attribute to that using zOSMF. So this is using the modify. I'm also going to make sure here that I keep 30 copies of any members that get updated. And I'm doing that also within this one activity. Now, this takes place, you don't submit a batch job as such. This takes place in the background on in the environment, and then after a certain amount of time, typically it's about 30 seconds, you will then see that the attribute of this little padlock here has been added, which means the data set is now protected and is also locked as well. In other words, members will need to be checked out before you can make updates to them. What I can also do here is I'm going to show how we would do the checkout process using zOSMF. So I'm selecting one of the members within that data set, and I'm saying, okay, here I am going to check it out to me, to my user ID. Note, even if I am an auditor or an administrator, But I do not have automatic ability to process that data set outside of Change Tracker. I still have to grant myself or grant somebody the ability to be able to access and process that data set if the data set is locked. So I'm also putting the comment in here to say, okay, make changes to CYG arc only. And then after that, after it will go through in the background, you will see here a request for checkout. And then after that is completed, you will now have a little flag here to show that that member of that data set has been checked out. The zOSMF piece, as well as the ISPF piece, also allows a checkout list of members within the data sets to show what's actually been checked out and available for update. So to access a checkout member, what I'm actually doing here is I'm going to go after CYG check. That is not the member that I checked out in the previous step. I checked out CYG arc in the previous step. So what happens if I try to do something against CYG check? I'll type in save here. It says, okay, this library, this data set has checked out members, but CYG check is not one of them. So in other words, nope, that's not the member that you can update. If you needed to update that, you have to go back to the administrator and then ask them for permission, for the authorization, check out the member so that you can then update that. So instead, I'm going to go back to the correct member here, which is CYG arc. I'm going to type in save against that member, and then it says, yes, that's okay. Protected by Change Tracker means, yes, you're okay to make this update, and the update has been saved. After we've done that, this is something questions have come up in previous conferences. For example, when we were in the UK in November, was asked, well, is this something that you could put into a batch process? Yes. What we're doing here is we're showing the zOSMF interface to do this on the fly, as it were. But also, this is something that, let's say, if you have a change window on a Saturday night, if you wanted to pre-stage some of these, unlocking or checking out of members in the data set, then that's something that could be pre-staged before the maintenance window, and you could then execute it, as well as after the maintenance window, you would then you would then run that, the reverse of that process to lock, to check in the data set, the members of the data set again, and lock it down. Within the zOSMF interface here, I'm going to check back in the member, put the comment in there why I'm checking it back in, and then in the background, you'll see the request for check-in. After a few seconds, you'll see here that it says, it's successfully backed up. It's then, it does its various functions in the background, and then after about 30 seconds, the started task is refreshed, and you should then see that the checkout count has gone back to 0, because there's no longer any members checked out within this data set. I'm going to pause briefly. Butch, are there any questions in the chat?
No questions in the chat.
Okie dokie. Then we'll go on to the next stage, which is the recovery of members within the data set in the case of something going wrong. So once again, we have Alice. She has one of her sysprogs who's made a change in the environment that's caused a problem. And so Alice needs to see what's happened and be able to go back and verify and work out how to correct the problem that may have taken place. So what Change Tracker allows you to do is to be able to see what changes were made in the environment. You can get another sysprog to help out, make some changes if necessary, or can just simply recover the version of the member in the data set as it was before. So if we're using the ISPF interface, what we can do in that particular case is we would select option 3, which is recover in this case. We would then select the data set in question that we want to recover to. We can then look at the various members which have backups, and then by selecting that data set, we can see, for example, which members have had changes made in this particular case. SYCU copy, this is the member in question that we need to look at. We can see the changes that have taken place within the complete data set. This is one of the capabilities within the ISPF piece, to be able to go back and look at any changes that were made. And there would also be comments here if the comments were supplied.
Hey, Chris, we do have a question.
Okay.
It says, any integration with your change system planned? So change says updated to prog 00, and this then gets unlocked for the user who is doing the change.
We've had that question asked before. That is one of the things that is being looked into, how we can integrate with any particular change with change management system. If we'd be interested to know, for example, which change management system or change system in question there. You know, just for we'd pass that on then to Mana for information. So if the person could also mention what change system they're using today.
Service first. So I'll note that, and we can pass it on to Morna.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep. As I say, that is a question that we have received before, and that is something that would be looked into to how to integrate that. Okay, so we do the we then select the recovery member here, and one of the capabilities that I was talking about was the ability to you know, to view a member, and within ISPF that would be done using a split screen type capability. So we'd this is the original copy of the member. And then if we go back and look at the current version of the member, we'll see, for example, that 3 lines have been inserted. Now, as I mentioned under ISPF, that would be, we'd have to do that in a split screen type capability. So what I would say here is I'm going to select the member for recovery now, and then under ISPF, it would be recovered to a data set name, which is still a PDS, and it's under the user's high-level qualifier with a date and timestamp. And so we're not intentionally overlaying the original member within the library. You can then go and do a comparison, and using normal mechanisms, then determine how to move the data set, let's say data set member, back into production and use it that way. Now, one of the things that we've actually seen when we were talking to a customer, and it wasn't specifically about Change Tracker, but it is definitely a case where Change Tracker would have helped. So unbeknownst to this customer, they were sharing an initialization member for a subsystem between test and production. And unfortunately, they found out the hard way that somebody made a change to the test environment, and then all of a sudden the production environment was non-operational, and it actually turned out to be for a significant amount of time, because they then had to go and look for a backup copy of the data set and member, which turned out to not be on a local copy available. They had to go to an offsite location to find the copy. And then this actually took about 3 hours or so to find, during which time this production application was not available. Now, how could Change Tracker have helped in this case? As we've seen, it would have been able to recover the member from the library, and then also to be pretty much within minutes, so that it would then be able to be moved back into the production, and in the production member could then be initialized successfully. Now, I just want to reiterate that IBM zOS Change Tracker is not just for IBM zOS products. It can also be used for ISV products. If you've got other key applications, let's say, that are being running, from products such as, Broadcom or BMC, those are also then, things that you could track. I mean, in my own environment, just for testing purposes, I track my SMP libraries, or I track my own JCL member to see when updates are made. Library. Those are the kind of things that can be tracked as well. If it's a PDS or a PDSE in this particular this particular time, those can be tracked and protected. So Going back to the member screen, let's have a look and see how we would do this under zOSMF. And this is another one of those things that's planned for near-term rather than long-term implementation. So using the drop-down menu here, I'd highlight the recover piece, and here it will show me the various versions that I have available to be recovered, including the comments that were made when the changes were made to those members. Now I have a couple of icons over here that I can use, and those, one of them is recover, but the other one is compare in this particular case. So if I select a compare here, let's say if I selected the -3 version, it would automatically compare it with the current version. And what you will get at the end is, we'll show that in a second, is you'll get a comparison there. But first of all, if I wanted to recover from that particular member from the -1 version, then I can either recover into another data set or I can recover in place. Now, so the zOSMF piece, at least it was planned when I took the screenshot, it was planned that you could also do a recover in place. Otherwise, you can recover into another data set, and that data set could either be an existing one that you use specifically for this, or you could generate a name to do that. As I mentioned, the comparison capabilities here, this is how I would do it in zOSMF, and this would be much easier to use, let's say, than the ISPF piece where I'd have to kind of split screen and go back and forth. Here I can do a side-by-side comparison using the zOSMF editor, and I can see here, for example, where lines have been added to a particular member versus or as it was versus as it is now. I don't think there's any other questions at this point because I got a little thing at the top that says chat, so I'm not seeing that still says 2. So good to continue, Butch, right?
Yes.
And I
yeah.
will.
Yes.
Okay. So auditing activities, and another one of those pieces of the pie that we saw at the beginning. We have in this case Derek, who is a compliance evidence provider. He's a security engineer. He needs to make sure that the configuration data sets, and there's a lot of them in zOS, needs to know how they've been changed, who's been changing them, and when they were changed. So for this, he's classified within zOS Change Tracker as an auditor. There's out-of-the-box reports that he can run. It allows filtering on event type, whether it was an addition, an update, deletion, rename, a zap, whether the date and time range, if he wants to limit it down, let's say, to a 24-hour period or less. He can then select particular members or all members, and then also specify what libraries he wants to look at as well. So using ISPF, that would be option 2. And one of the things I just wanted to point out is that some of these profiles for the administrator and for the auditor are protected within your security system. And that in this particular case, when I first tried to execute this, I was not authorized to be an auditor within the security system. So I got this message to start with, and I had to request access to be an auditor so that I could then get the next panel, which allowed me to drill down a little bit more into to see what activities have taken place. Now, what we saw earlier on in the presentation was what is shown in the started task. This is now the ability to do reporting from one of the change tracker databases in order to then be able to provide compliance reports in a very timely manner, to be able to then show that to the people who are asking for evidence of what's happened in the environment. This can also be performed in batch as well. What we just showed previously was the ISPF interface. So from here in batch, I can then limit down to a particular range in time. I can start one day at midnight and then end effectively the next day at midnight. So I'm trying to gather 2 days worth of information and show what actually has happened. And in batch here, I can get an update to show which members have been updated in which data sets. And I can do that en masse as well. So we can see here, for example, that in ctailor.jcl.cntl, updates have been made, but in some of these other data sets, there have been no changes. So that's a quick, efficient way for the auditor to be able to get that information and to be able to supply it up the chain. I also have the ability to do auditing on an individual data set level from within the zOS interface, and that's at least the plan. And we then have an audit log. What you don't see in this version of the screenshot is that there's also the comments are also included here as well. This when I took these screenshots, that wasn't available at that time during the development cycle. So from snapshots, snapshots is also known as fingerprinting or tokenization. We're gradually moving over to the newer term of snapshot, and that will gain more relevance in upcoming changes to Change Tracker, especially within the zOSMF interface. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. So snapshots allow me to go against an entire file or entire data set volume, entire environments. So I can do a high-speed comparison in a live system and against other systems in the environment. There's a token that gets applied to the members within a member within a data set, so that we can see changes quickly rather than having to individually search through data sets in order to see whether changes have taken place. So this is how this would be performed in batch. I specify the names of the data sets that I want to interrogate, and then it will execute the process. And at the end, it will tell me in the individual data sets where changes have taken place. It will show me the difference was in the original data set as it was when the update was made, and that allows this is something that could run on a regular basis across the environment. Now for the snapshot comparison, this is something that is more long-term. This is not something that will be covered by PH 49337, the APAR that is hopefully going to be delivered in the near future. This is something that we envisage, so this is more of a mock-up of what something might look like, but this is where we would be able to initiate snapshots as well as also look at snapshots that have been created across the environment, and then see, for example, which data sets were in the snapshot, where the changes were made, do comparisons between the snapshots to see where changes were made. And we also envisage this hopefully going across sysplexes rather than just within within one sysplex as well. So that's all parts of the planned vision that we have here as well.
We have another question.
Yep.
From Dave. Have you thought of tracking an authorized user? So an audit trail of what they have done, for example, any change we do require elevated access, but we can only trace their activities on rack calls and not what they actually changed. This could be an update to a member or amend a TWS job schedule.
Okay. If I understand the question correctly, even if a elevated user, in other words, someone who's been, when you're using the term elevated user, are you using the term in the sense of a security elevated user, or is it more in the sense of a change tracker elevated user? I guess would be my question. If it would be tracked, is the question, would you want to only track elevated users as a separate ability, or because otherwise it's going to be monitored anyway, I guess is what I'm trying to lead to.
Yeah, so sorry, can you hear me? Yes.
Yes, I can.
Yeah, so what it is so basically for a change that has to be applied, a user automatically gets connected to an elevated access group that gives them access to do what they want to do. So that's controlled by a change process. But then what they do within that change window, we can only really see on rack calls or whether we start then interrogating SMF records, which obviously takes a lot longer.
Yeah.
If there's something that would give you an audit trail of exactly, not like a, for example, if you did a key logger sort of thing that I think they do on Linux side and that sort of stuff. There's nothing like that on the mainframe that would track if somebody what they've actually physically done.
Yeah.
Not,
yeah, I mean,
this is have to be all predefined what you're tracking. Whereas if you could flip it round, track a user ID to see what they've done.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, so the way I'd envisage that, let's say if I put it in change tracker terminology, it would be, let's say I have a protected data set rather than a locked data set. So in other words, instead of locking members down, I would just say I'm tracking what's going on. Well, kind of it would do it in that.
It'd have to be a wide net though to track everything, wouldn't it? That's the thing.
Yeah.
Because obviously,
Yeah.
if you haven't tracked everything, then it wouldn't be recorded.
Yeah.
Yeah, but-
Okay.
yeah, I was-
That's it. That's interesting. I think we'll have to think about that a little bit.
Let me ask a question, Dave. So if are you, what you're referring to is, let's say I put a change in and I want to change the SMF parm suffix from 00 to 01. But while I'm in there, I could potentially change any line I want because I've checked the member out. Are you looking at that kind of audit where we actually see specifically what they changed?
Yes, but that's part of it. But they could also, because we don't actually tie our elevated access down to specific tasks. So when they've got access, they have a wider access than what the change gives them potentially. So it's actually making sure that they only do what they're allowed to do within that change.
Right. Yeah, because within Change Tracker, they only get access to that one member, but once inside that member, they can change any line they want. So that's kind of where I was coming from as well. Okay.
Yeah, that's true too. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, we have our emails, listed on the start of the presentation. So if you want to fire us an email on that, we will definitely follow up. This is something that we would discuss with Mana, who's the product manager within IBM for this. So if you could please send that to us, then we can. We're definitely looking for input. That's one of the reasons we like to talk at these events.
Yeah. Yeah, because the whole purpose of change trackers, they don't get access to any other members. They only get the one they checked out. But once inside that member, they could change anything. So
yeah, we're good, Anna. We got about 5 minutes, right?
Yeah, I was just going to say, couldn't the checkout process actually make that a protected file as part of that process?
Yeah, I mean, it's more to do, I think, with how one could track things and what's available within the OS. What we're looking at today is somewhat, I wouldn't say limited. It's just that it doesn't probably expand to being able to see actually what changes were made within a member and being able to to do that. So that's why I'd like to get a little bit better understanding so that we can get a more formal response to that.
Okay, continue.
Mm-hmm. So anyway, we've got about 5 minutes to go. So being a zOS 2.5 feature, it is configurable using zOSMF, which is the way that things are done nowadays. So just a couple of examples here of how we, the workflow that is generated for zOS change tracker, including a drill down here to to be able to, for example, configure the palmlib as well as configure the email data and all those kind of good stuff. It could, or if we run it through the security configuration assistant with my user ID, then also it will show us what I have access to and what I don't have access to if there was something that was missing in the definitions. On that note here, you can kind of see at the bottom just a couple of the resources that, well, there's actually only two at the moment, that are available for differentiating between users, admin, and auditors. And those are basically the three kind of roles that are within Change Tracker as a user, as it were. That would be the person who can view and edit data sets. The administrator is the person who would, or group of people who would assign the ability, what to monitor, if authorize people to be able to make changes within Change Tracker, and would have control over the configuration. That's the administrator, and then the auditor would be the person who's allowed to look at a more global level on the changed information within Change Tracker. Now, just to reiterate, ultimately, whether you or not someone is able to view or change a data set is determined by the external security product. So RACF, Top Secret, ACF2, those ultimately have the control whether somebody can access a data set in the first place. This just provides a more granular capability on the member level. the question hasn't come up yet, but people are asking us also about USS files, Unix system services files within the USS structure. That is being looked into to be able to provide the same form of locking mechanism as is performed on PDS and PDSEs, because as we know, there's a lot of configuration members now that reside within the USS structure. So just in summary quickly, it's a price feature available as of May 2022. The zOS MF interface should hopefully, the first iteration of that should be here, hopefully not too long in the future. What it can monitor and protect, the ability to recover quickly, audit, and we talked about snapshots as well. Here are Butch and my details. As I say, there's those of you who know Manawali, she's also available. I didn't really have a room on this slide to put her information here, but if you reach out to us with the questions and comments, and then last but not least, please remember to fill out your question, your reviews here and we are session 3E in this conference.
Okay, so
Yes.
I have given everybody the ability to unmute themselves if you would like to ask a person-to-person question. You are able to do that right now.
Chris either did a great job or we have some shy people.
It's
Chris,
probably
can you just
the
go back to
format.
that? Can you just go back to that last screen so I can screenshot your emails?
Okay, just 1 second, if I can find it again. Yeah.
You should be able to download the slides.
Okay, that's fine then.
Yeah, in the bring your own agenda, there's a little man pointing. He's the guy you click on in order to get the slides.
Yeah, or
I'm
you can use,
assuming
if you can see the QR code, that should also lead you to it as well.
well, that's the feedback.
Yeah.
But yeah, you can. You should be able to download the slides, assuming the guys have put them up there.
Yeah, I put them up yesterday, so hopefully they're out there.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you. Okay, if there are no questions, then we've reached the end of the session by time. So again, thank you to Chris and Butch, and thank you very much for dealing with my poor internet. I actually got thrown out of Zoom 50%. so you could still hear me, but everything was frozen. So in the end, I exited and returned, and it seemed to work. Okay.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.
I'll end the session now. Okay, thank you very much. Bye.
Bye then.